geluba naqdogliyo nugal waa ku darara melay nabadi joogta.
Welcome to ISIRKA. My name's Amina Isir, and join me as I take you on a journey to explore identity, culture, and belonging. Take a seat as I take you through time, space, and various perspectives of cultural identity. Stay tuned to see where the journey will take us today. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of ISIRKA. I just want to share a little bit or kind of quickly touch on my summer trip. So I put a poll up on Instagram and I said, like, I asked people like what trip they wanted to hear about, like what country. And I even included like Minneapolis. So I did like London, Minneapolis, Kenya, Tanzania, and Minneapolis won. I'm not doing Minneapolis yet, or like right now. But I'll do East Africa. I'll do like Kenya and Tanzania. Tanzania was winning, but I also kind of really want to touch on Kenya just a little bit. I really wanted to kind of touch on both of them together. I was not in Tanzania that long. I was in Kenya, I was in Nairobi, and I had a couple of days, and then I decided just to kind of maximize the opportunity and then go to Arusha, being that it's close to Nairobi. But I didn't go to Zanzibar. Inshallah, next time I'll go to Zanzibar or Dar es Salaam and see like the beach and the coast and everything. But the one thing that was really cool about being in both countries, though, I really appreciate the fact that English is like one of the most common languages. But the fact that I am like Somali. So not everyone knew I was Somali, but they knew I was like familiar in some way. And that is something that I think is really interesting because when I originally went back home, like to Somalia, Somaliland, and things like that, I was like, okay, I am Somali, like Digiga, like, you know, everything is Somali. And this is the one place, not the one place, but at least here, you know, like I'll definitely like be able to like fit in and be a part of this like social fabric. And that was not the case. Like on every single level, everything like was kind of a learning experience about being there and engaging in like the societal fabric. But East Africa, like those two countries, because like it was familiar. It was familiar, I think, to my life in the West in a lot of ways. It was familiar in the sense of also like, you're not fully an insider and you're not doing the insider outsider negotiation. You are an outsider, like I'm an outsider, but at the same time it's kind of like, oh, but you know, you kind of look like this, and like it's my name, especially like having a very Arabic Muslim name. Everybody was like, huh, so you must be this or you must be this. I learned that Amina apparently is Swahili as well. And so when I was in Kenya, they were like, oh, the maga'aga wa maga' Swahili, so inaad luqada Swahili na baratid. I said, wariyaalahay wax madii sheega ema kuunba af Soomaaliga la qabsadayo waqti yar isiiyaya, and then I'll come back to that. But that was really like, I really appreciate, like I understood it. And I think the whole kind of like, oh, when people always kind of like, Africans are always like, or your own specific like ethnic like country or group or people, when they're like afkaaga ha ilaawin, dhaqankaagana ha ilaawin, dadka ka timidna ha ilaawin, halkaasay ka timaada, like, you know, and like that basically we need something that will kind of tie us all together, and don't get too lost or don't get too caught like far away, or don't believe yourself to be a Westerner when you are still like kind of a part of us. Like dadka kala duwan ajnabiga siday la dhaqmayaan, oo dadka like, you know, wadanaha galbeedka ka imaaday siday la dhaqmayaan is obviously different than how aniga la dhaqmayaan, right? So to kind of keep that insider or that like that connection. So yeah, but I want to touch on one, like this was like one little moment, but it really, 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 really like kind of solidified a lot of the stuff that I talk about and my general awareness at this age about my identity and where it lies, in the sense of like the identity identity politics are always going to continue, and I don't think it's just kind of like markat iyal tahay or something like that. Like, it's always a negotiation how you show up in personal and professional spaces. And so it's kind of just like important to like realize, like, you know, so Nairobi, when I was in Kenya, the thing that really kind of like always threw me off though was the negotiation between are you Somali or Kenyan Somali started before I even went to Kenya, and I was just kind of like, I was unaware of that dynamic. Kenyan Somalis are doing their thing, and I think especially now with the recent elections, there's a lot of Somali Kenyans that are in political power and stuff like that. So go you, like, y'all killing it. But also then sometimes, like, even like a lot of the police or like security guards and stuff like that are Somali Kenyan or Kenyan Somalis too, which I think is very interesting, because that's kind of how in the US how Italians and Irish back in the days, that's how they became Adan, like how they went from being like dadka bulshada ugu hooseya, or like the lowest ranked of society, and then they became privileged because they're literally law enforcement. That was like, so that's an interesting dynamic. And even like I was on a bus, we got stopped at a checkpoint by a police officer. He was Somali. I didn't realize he was Somali. Like, he completely did not look Somali to me. And that was really kind of, he just had no facial hair. And even another guard, he spoke to me in Swahili, and I don't know anything in Swahili. And then I saw his name and he was Somali, and I was like, but I guess that is his native language at that point. But so when the police officer stopped us on the bus, he literally one by one, all the Muslim names he called out. And I was just like, what is happening here? And then the guy sitting next to me was like, he is also Muslim. And I was like, oh, I thought this was some discrimination stuff. I was like, I didn't know how this was gonna go. But he was like, yeah, like, you know, he's like, can't you tell he's Somali? And I was like, no. And I was like, he's just, because honestly, the lack of facial hair, like, it's just, it really makes somebody look different. And the ones that I saw had no facial hair at all. I don't know, it was kind of different for me. So I didn't really think that they were Somali. They didn't look that Somali to me. But yeah, so he was like, yeah, he's like, you can't tell by his humor that he's Somali. I sat next to this Kenyan man on the bus for a long time, and I shouldn't have even said that guy didn't look Somali. I mean, he didn't physically look Somali to me, because then the same guy, he said to me, oh, where are you from? And I said, oh, I'm Somali. And he said, oh, you don't look like a Somali. And I knew exactly what he meant. And I was like, what do you mean by that? Like, look at this forehead. Like, I look Somali, you know. And he's like, oh, but you don't wear a hijab. And this was literally right after I came back on the bus. So I was at the border between Kenya and Tanzania. And I was like so surprised by how easy it is to kind of cross borders, like in Somaliland especially. I mean, I think maybe, yeah, I'm just gonna say Somaliland but the checkpoints in Somali like territories freak me out, bro. Like, it's never like, you know, like even Hudalaha and stuff like, it's always just so, I was so surprised by this border that was so easy to cross and like no drama. So we stopped on one side. It's like literally like the American Canadian border. The bus stops on one side, you walk out, you go through, and then you come out on the other side. And on the Tanzanian side, all the aunties are hustling, but also like it's beautiful. Like there's mountains, and even driving through that part of Tanzania to kind of get into Arusha, like parts of it did look like Somaliland, not gonna lie. But it's so mountainous and hilly. Like, I really, like, inshallah, I hope I get a chance to kind of go back to Tanzania and spend a little bit more time there. But the aunties are hustling. They're selling whatever. So I, on the way back to Kenya, I just stopped on the Kenyan side, actually, of the border. or when we were like had crossed the border back to the Kenyan side, I just wanted to go get some money to put on my phone. And the whole time in Tanzania, I only saw one Somali and I knew them, like, you know? So I was not operating, like, expecting to see any Somalis, right? And then I go to a little shop and I was like, oh, can I get, like, some money to put into my phone? And then there were two men in front of me. I started telling this story on Instagram and I never got a chance to finish it. So bear with me. I'm excited to kind of give it a fair opportunity now. So there's two men standing in front of me working at the shop. One is a younger gentleman. He's dark skinned. He's very like scrawny. And he's wearing like a kufi and then khamis wixdin here, okay? Quran is playing in the background, okay? And then the other guy is maybe like, I don't think it's his dad, but it's like a middle-aged man, like, you know, that could be his father type thing. I see his kind face, and I had these beautiful full locks, okay, like fake dreadlocks, honey blonde, like no, like caramel blonde, very long, and I was like, oh, are you guys Somali? And then he looked the younger one. I actually sent a smile. I said, oh, Somali Batin. And the younger one looked at me and said, huh? He's like, I think I must. He goes, yes, I am a Somalian. He goes, are you? And then Ninko Odega, he's like, ha ha, Somali Batin. And I was like, yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm Somali. And then he was like, hijab ka ganam haku da'ay. And I said, oh, inshallah, you know. And then I was like, inshallah marun baxin doona but laakiin imika hadaa luqada isku fahnay then you know xiriirkeena inta like you know intaas like is more than enough type of thing, you know. And then the old man was like, like he was so nice, and that's the only reason I said something, you know, like because he had such a kind looking face. I was kind of operating with the guise of like I'll just kind of be whatever, like, you know, to kind of go under the radar and like live my life. And then after that, the younger guy was still not. He was not done. He was like, "Ah, maadiga Somalia, waan hijab xidhan." He goes, "Halkaad ka timaadey? Maraykankaad ka timaadey?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And then he was like, and then he was like, "Huh? The hijab?" I said, "Ha, inshallah. Hey, Malin would accent, like, you know." I was like, "How long have you?" I was like, "You guys have a good day." Like, I'm about to go on my about my business. And then that moment, like that whole incident, and then after that, like I got on the bus, and then me and the guy I was sitting next to got into this whole conversation about like Somalis in Kenya and the history, and then he was asking all these questions about why women wear jalabib and things like that. And it's very interesting, like the ways in which, like, because in Somaliland, right, like Somali umbadikta, so then nobody really like says anything about our cultural norms and stuff. But it's interesting being where people have to live amongst us or witness us, and the things that they say about us or how they perceive us is mad entertaining, because I'm just kind of like, honestly, I don't think Somalis give a shit about what other people think about them. But it's interesting because people are genuinely very curious. Like, I had a bunch of conversations in Kenya about like Somalis and the history and why and how things kind of change in terms of like how Somalis engage and dress and things like that. A lot more than I didn't really expect to speak about that at all, but I had a bunch of conversations about that. And I think a part of it is also like being in East Africa. Like, a lot of the people that I met also worked in Somalia related things, like, you know, like if you're in Kenya, Somalia is so close that you can work on development projects. I'm sure there's a lot of development projects like throughout the years especially happening. So it's interesting that all these people are engaging with the country and the people, and it's just kind of like still just from like so far removed from even having a space to kind of understand how people function. Like, if I hear like the textbook stuff is very old, antiquated, and is not nuanced. And so I think there definitely could like afford to be some kind of education like within that general space, but to each his own. But back to the story at the border, okay? This is my life. Like, I really don't understand the generational difference, but it's really like there's a generational divide where like the older generation is very much just kind of like Somali Nimo is still central to them. The ones that I deal with, right? Like, so I don't really get any old people telling me how to dress or what to do. But the men my age is a different story. And that is a story, I guess, in a conversation for another lifetime. But I think there's something really big about the fact that I think we just, like, the younger generation, the post-war generation just has not, we're not accepting or tolerant of difference. Like, they grew up in a, but I think they grew up in a very, very rigid, like, staunch, like, strong sense of, like, this is it. And the previous generation, like, they saw so many different changes, different ways of what it meant to be, or like how you could express yourself. And they're always just like, we never saw this. And it's like, okay, but war happened, conflict happened, state collapse happened, people regrouped, and kind of society functioned, or like regrouped to be something completely different, right? I think to give the people a lot of solace and direction amidst total and utter like devastation, or like demolition of anything that existed beforehand, you know? Like, I remember when I was in Hargeisa, I asked my Habari, I was like, you know, when did people become like this religious? Like, to the point where like in Somaliland, there's not too many places that you can go without hearing an adhan. And even like you're outside of the city in the middle of nowhere and there's still like masjids and stuff, which I did see in Togo. So, you know, I will also kind of offer that. But, and then she was like, you know, so I think there's a very like real connection kind of between, and like geopolitics and stuff like that was happening at the time. But the lack of tolerance of difference or acceptance, I mean, we could start with tolerance, lack of tolerance of difference, lack of acceptance of difference. But I think really like kind of what I've seen with the older generation is really, I think there's a strong value in the Somali identity, and they respect that. And in Tasbakufilan, and I feel like for the younger people, it's not like that. They're for people of my generation. So with that said, I really wanted to kind of really dissect that or talk about that a lot more, but I don't really have anything to say about that right now at this stage. I'm just kind of like, to each his own, and so but other than that, in Tanzania I didn't really see much, but actually building upon that, right? Okay, so if I really want to go there with that, then that basically, that whole interaction is just kind of like a how dare you do you type of thing, like, and reiterates whose role it is to kind of exercise the norms, dominance, social norms, etc. So the craziest thing about being in Tanzania, I don't know anything about the politics in Tanzania. All I know is I saw Auntie Samia Hassan, okay, Habari, everywhere. And that was the first time, you know how Africans and people former colonized world love representing their heads of state, and Habari Samia's face was everywhere in this city, and I thought that was so cool. That was the first time I've ever been in a country where a woman was the head of state. In Tasbakatag, she's a black Muslim woman who's a hijabi, and she's just everywhere. Her Excellency Samia Hassan. So that was really cool to see, and also surreal, and also just kind of like, look what can happen, I guess, if you make space for 50% of your population to like take up space, to actually like be in positions of power and do things. And yeah, I mean, I was in Tanzania very briefly, but I think everybody was like really nice. Parts of it, Arusha was interesting. So I really cannot kind of continue or talk about Tanzania without mentioning Adero. Like I went to Tanzania, I went to Arusha specifically because that was Adero's birthplace. And because I was so close, I was like, oh, I might as well check it out. And then now I have a 10-year visa to Tanzania. So inshallah, I can go back and actually spend time there. But I didn't have time to go to like his specific neighborhood or whatever. Actually, Tanzania is when like my body was like, Amina, we are done. Like we're tired. Like why are you still running around? But it was a nice little peek into parts of it. Did look a lot like Somaliland and stuff like that, and it wasn't, so that was like familiar as well. But at one point when I was getting money on my cell phone, the guy was like, Amina, Musa, are you this tribe? And I was like, no. And I'm like, I appreciate the fact that you guys are all willing to claim me, and these freaking Somalis, like, who, you know, my blood and like ancestry and everything are still just like, why are you, like, you look different, we don't want this. I'll one day get over it, but not anytime soon. And so I also appreciate the fact that like it was really cool kind of also seeing different people of different religions, and so many different ethnic groups kind of living amongst each other, and how people kind of accepted, not accepted, but yeah, people just kind of accepted like everyone's difference. Like when I was at the border, there were Maasai people that just crossed the border. They didn't have to show any passports or anything. And there were people like, and they just kind of get a pass. I find like, I also saw like Indian East Africans, like Kenyans and Tanzanians, which is like easily cross the border and stuff. And it's just kind of like, it was just an opportunity, really, a lot of different narratives and stories and things like that I heard of. Like, it was just cool to see it all. And it was a nice little, like, really kind of, I think more than anything, what I gained from this experience. Also, I have to say, so I also went to, when I was in Kenya, I went to like a resort, and it was beautiful. I'm really here for the Swahili coast. I think at this point that the elements, like I know what the elements are, it doesn't matter where they are, like everything's a little bit familiar. Even like when I was kind of closer to like Mombasa and stuff, I went a little bit outside of Mombasa, there were women who were MPs who were hijabis. Like it was so crazy just to kind of see like Muslim women having like so much political power and be visible. You know, Somalia, what are you guys doing? But the Swahili coast is still like it all, like it has a lot of like the elements. The food was very kind of similar, like the and I appreciate also the fact that it's like a celebration and appreciation of like so many different types of people, cultures being brought together, and like they coexist and live amongst each other. Like, even when I was in Mombasa, I took a picture and it was like we coexist in peace, and it was like different religious symbols and things like that. And there's a lot to be said about that. And I think it also it allows people to have I mean, that's definitely, I think, I still very much am just kind of like so used to white Black America that every time I see something that like outside of that, but also still like innate to kind of like the identities that I hold, and like the person, I'm just so appreciative for the fact that like type of existence is there, and I'm just like, dang, yo, like I really appreciate this, and I'd rather be here. And this like little trip to East Africa just kind of made me like really see that and appreciate that. And I think every time when I go back, or whenever I go to the continent or travel, or like within that space, I'm always just kind of like, oh, it's just kind of like, you don't realize like how important like socially like to kind of exist and see in a way, like exist in a way where you're not like you don't have to explain yourself in the same way. So people just have absolutely no idea, you know? And it's not like so I really appreciated that. And Kenya and Tanzania, Wakuka, that was like pretty much, listen, despite all my talking though, I would like to go back to Hargeisa soon. So I'm just gonna include that in this, just to kind of say, like, if you see me out in these streets, JK. But yeah, no, I think this whole trip also made me realize, like, or not realize, but this whole trip, everywhere I was just kind of like, oh, Hargeisa, like, oh, Hargeisa, like, so yeah, there's a part of me that still would kind of like to go check it out, but I think more than anything, like, kind of building off the theme of this trip was like, oh, what the possibilities could look like is, I'm like, whoa, there's so many different ways to exist. And I think like this experience of like kind of being like familiar but different, and being amongst so much like diversity in all aspects, like, was what I really appreciated. The homogeneity is not a space where I feel comfortable in, and more than anything, I'm just kind of like, okay, like, the possibilities, like, it just, I really appreciated my little, like, introduction to East Africa. And one more country, and then East Africa, like, I don't know if that'll happen, but also, Kofurta, galbeedka iyo waqooyiga oo dhan Africa ba ii haray. So yeah, inshallah, the journey continues, the marathon continues, and I think I'll do an episode about London next. London is one of my favorite cities. It's my favorite Somali city, and I really like, I had a bunch of travels this year, so I briefly went to London, and every time it just kind of feels like, a little bit of home. So stay tuned for more.